As the biggest financial fraud at that point in American history unravels, the stock market feels its effects. Some of gaming's giants are under pressure, and Sierra, a legendary computer game company, will be crushed out of existence. How this company started as a garage project in the mountains, to then become a colossus in the PC space, only to be mercilessly brushed away by the winds of destiny, is the stuff of legends. And today, we're exploring that story. Los Angeles, late 70s. A couple of college sweethearts, married at 18, are looking for their fortune in the new and exciting world of computers. Their names are Roberta and Ken Williams. Ken might have been a college dropout, but his skills as a self-taught techie and his ability to learn quickly meant he could climb onto better and better jobs. And with his insistence, Roberta trained as a computer operator and programmer so they could pursue every opportunity in the rapidly expanding LA tech scene. But this rosy life had a little problem. Los Angeles was a bit of a shitty place to live on during the 70s. Hours lost on traffic, drugs, and violence. Ah yes, good old LA in the past. Given that the young couple just had their second son, they were eager to move to somewhere a bit less, you know. But computer-related jobs outside the city were very, very rare. How will they ever find employment? But maybe they could create their own. A cottage industry of software developers shipping programs in tapes and discs across the country via mail was brewing up, and Ken had the perfect product idea. A big shift in computers was happening, from the big expensive mainframe to what was known as the home computer. A computer for normal, everyday people right in your room. Roberta's Christmas present to Ken in 1977 was an Apple II, one of the world's first highly successful mass-produced microcomputers. Like we all do when we get a new gadget on Christmas, he immediately got it out of its box and started playing with it. And he was almost immediately convinced this was their ticket out. He will create the hottest, most interesting product one could use in a computer. He will create a fucking compiler. Home computers like the Apple II relied on something called BASIC, a high-level programming language that focused on making computers approachable to a general audience. Ken, however, was used to more advanced and optimal languages, frequently present on big boy mainframe computers, such as Fortran. And he was convinced that making a high-performance Fortran compiler for the Apple II was his ticket out of LA, as undoubtedly every programmer will see its value. Every day he will continue to work for other companies, and every night he will work on his compiler. But something was about to happen that will throw a wrench into his plans. To still be able to do his day job remotely, he brought home a teletyper. This was long before the internet, and the way some people would work remotely was by connecting to a mainframe computer via a phone line, using an acoustic modem that will translate data into sound. Evidently, this was extremely slow, so this was only for text, but it worked. One day, while connected to a remote mainframe, Ken found something unusual.
Wait, what is that?
It's a game. It's called Colossal Cave Adventure.
What?
If you're a video game person, you can probably remember a moment like this. The first time you just started playing a game and something just clicked inside you. According to Roberta herself, she will barely do anything else for a month. Any second she was not playing or sleeping, she was thinking about the game. And once it ended, something in her had changed forever. There was a small industry of homebrew adventure games for the Apple II, and she will voraciously consume all she could get her hands on. And it was not long before she asked a key question: can I make my own game for this? And when Roberta really wants something, she will not rest until it happens.
I want to make a game. It's a murder mystery, like Agatha Christie's novels where you have to find the killer.
While Ken was a bit shocked at the start, it quickly became obvious this was an idea worth exploring. Ken could build the tools necessary for Roberta to make her game, and if he was going to take a short break away from his Fortran business idea, he might as well do it for something interesting.
What if we could find a way to add images to the game?
Huh? You can do that?
Ken almost immediately regretted the suggestion. To put it into perspective, the floppy disk was one of the most standard units of storage at the time, and it could hold a whopping 110 kilobytes of data. And the Apple II had 64 kilobytes of RAM at best, so getting full pictures in a game was a bit of a memory challenge. But as Ken watched Roberta make a sketch of the game art, a light bulb went on his head. Maybe he knew of a tool that could actually solve his problems. This is called a Versa Writer, a mechanical tool meant for drawing graphics in a computer by making points on a grid. What if they could store those points and then have a subroutine draw the lines that connect them instead of storing a whole image? That way, Roberta could make the game art using a browser writer and get to store all of it in one floppy disk. Along with that, Ken will create a series of tools so Roberta could write and design the rest of the game. This was way before anything that we could consider an engine or game developing tools was commercially available. And the result was what we may consider one of the first utilities for making adventure games, which Roberta immediately put to work to produce Mystery House, a fully fleshed adventure game. But to Ken, this was still another project, a distraction from the Fortran compiler that will allow him to make his own company. In fact, during his visits to the closest computer shop, Ken will often go on about this Apple II Fortran compiler and how it will revolutionize software development in the platform forever to a not particularly fascinated audience. But during one of those visits, he decided to show off this little side project Roberta was working on. The reaction was way more than he expected. Quickly, people gathered around the computer fascinated by these text adventures with pictures. Before long, the store owner asked him if Roberta would be interested in selling copies of their games at the store. And only then did Ken finally realize that he had been paying attention to the wrong project to build a company from. Roberta could not have been happier at the reception of the game demo and quickly got busy working on packaging. She will sell the game under Ken's consulting brand, Online Systems, on Ziploc bags with the cover art pasted on top. Crude, but effective. The game sold instantly among the clients of the local PC store. They just could not copy discs fast enough to keep in stock. Before long, every store in the area was calling them asking for copies of the game that they have heard about. And with Roberta hard at work at what they began calling the high-res adventure series of games, this was it. The perfect opportunity. They could make games and sell them to stores via mail. It was time to take their little operations and move into the mountains. Yosemite National Park. This spectacular wonder of nature is by far my favorite thing to visit in California. Oh, okay, fine, second favorite thing. But Yosemite, the Sierra Nevada, the forest, a much better environment to raise a family compared to Los Angeles, or so will say the Williamses. Roberta's parents had retired and bought land to move away from the city in Oakhurst, a tiny city town? Census-designated place, and maybe a perfect place to start a company. The plan was simple. Roberta will make the games, and Ken will make the engine, market and ship them to stores around the country. But things moved quickly. Barely a few months in, they needed to get an office and hire people to answer the phone, take orders and package games. And the games quickly improved too. Ken Williams himself would become one of the writers of what was once considered the book on Apple II graphics back in the day. As it explains, high-res mode on the Apple II can only technically produce 6 colors, but Ken began noticing that extra colors will clearly be generated by blurring together 2 pixels with different colors next to each other. The technique is known as dithering, and it greatly extended the range of what the Apple II could do. Using this technique knowingly, he was able to add a feature to his drawing tool where Roberta could add color to the art. And this will allow her to create Wizard and the Princess, a fantasy-themed adventure game that, once again, was an enormous hit. Before long, some of the people they have hired to help copy and package the games were approaching them with ideas of their own. Some will be trained as fully fledged game designers, and soon other game designers from around the country will start sending their games for them to license. The business expanded, and soon they were on their way to becoming a game-releasing powerhouse. But as the company grew, it started catching more attention from some suspicious characters. Most of the stories on this video come from not all fairy tales have happy endings. The full story of Sierra written by Ken Williams himself, and according to him, one day they got a shocking phone call.
Yes. May I speak with Roberta and Ken Williams? I represent a venture capitalist firm called TA Associates, and we want to offer $1 million for 20% of your company.
Roberta did not like this. She had a bad feeling. But Ken was desperate to progress. Did he want to be the CEO of a bunch of kids in a chaotic office forever? Or did he want to own a real business, to be the CEO of a renowned, prestigious tech company? They were in no lack of money, but Ken's lack of business experience was constantly catching up to him. To have an actual experience board that he could consult and seek guidance on, he could never achieve his dream without this. So after barely convincing Roberta, they took the money. It was at this stage they realized that they have never formally registered the company, and that Online Systems was a name already registered to another company. Taking inspiration on the mountains of the Sierra Nevada that they will see every day, they called themselves Sierra Online. A real company with investors. Investors who desperately wanted their investment to grow in value fast. And they were very eager to use their new influence to push Ken and Roberta towards profitable ideas. Why should they limit the sales to games on home computers? Sierra clearly had the talent, so why not move up to the big leagues? Why make games in the computer market when you could move to game consoles? The computer game industry at the time was nothing compared to the titan of the console industry, Atari. While Atari had initially planned keeping close control of the games made for their Atari 2600, a series of lawsuits with a group of developers that had left them to form their own studio led to them opening the floodgates for external companies to make games for their hugely profitable ecosystem. However, consoles presented some problems. The main one is that no longer will Sierra be able to write games themselves in discs and sell them. Consoles required expensive and limited cartridges that had to be bought in bulk, but the pressure from the investors was unrelenting. They will never grow to be a dominant force in games if they do not move to consoles. So, finally convinced, Sierra spent millions buying Atari cartridges and equipping their offices for console game development. It was not like this could all disappear overnight. Oh, right. In what might be one of the most poorly timed decisions ever made in tech history, the entire game console industry in the US collapsed that very same year. The market in the US was oversaturated with poor quality games, all leading to what many consider the symbolic moment the bubble burst. The launch of the official E.T. game, which was so poorly reviewed and returned in such high quantities that it started a series of events that will bankrupt Atari, once considered one of the most promising tech companies in the whole country. Overnight, Sierra was left with millions of dollars worth of cartridges and developer kits that were now just paperweights. Looking to salvage something out of this disaster, their investors moved to merge Sierra with another one of their investments, Spinnaker, an educational software company. Roberta and Ken knew that over their next meeting, they would basically be forced to give out their company to someone else. Once the meeting started, their investors were surprised to see Ken alone wearing an ill-fitting suit. He apologized for Roberta being indisposed and sat down, too distracted to hear the presentation from Spinnaker. Was this it? The end of his dream of riches? Had he flown too close to the sun and missed his only chance?
Good morning! Sorry for being late, everyone. Just give me a second to get some coffee.
This was not the attitude anyone expected here. She was far from the nearly bankrupt woman they saw her as.
So, what are we talking about?
The management team from Spinnaker is here to talk about their company and see if there's anything we could be doing together.
That would be a waste of time to discuss. These guys are a joke. No one in the industry respects them.
When one of Sierra's investors tried to explain to Roberta and make her understand the delicate situation they were in, something inside her snapped. Oh, she had listened to all of them before. She had enough of things being explained to her.
We are not selling our company, and we are definitely not merging with Spinnaker. Ken and I still own 50% of the company, so you need both our signatures, and I am not signing. We are leaving. You coming or what?
So now Sierra had a piss-off board of investors and no money. But they were not going out without a fight. Because you see, one of the things that was giving Roberta the courage to challenge the board was that she had been working on what she thought was the best game she had ever designed. And she just needed one chance, any chance to get it into the world. They will borrow from every source they could, from personal credit cards and even taking a loan on their home. And then they waited for a miracle. And that miracle will come from the group of people they least expected. A small group of men dressed in suits and carrying briefcases descend on the small town of Oakhurst and head into the offices of Sierra, and the neighbors started gossiping and wondering. While all sorts of rumors and theories about secret federal agencies floated around, in reality these were none other than high-ranking employees of IBM. IBM was the world's biggest and most serious computer company on the 80s. Their realm was more towards big mainframes and business systems, but the success of home computers like the Apple II had made them reconsider and make a big move towards releasing an affordable home computer of their own, what they called the IBM personal computer. And now IBM was working on an entry-level IBM PC called the PC Junior. And they wanted to give Sierra a contract to produce an original game for their new system. And more importantly, they were willing to pay royalties in advance to fund the game. That game would be their last hope. And it was called King Quest. If King Quest was to save Sierra, it had to recreate the original elements that made Mystery House successful, a combination of great storytelling and a leapfrog in graphics. In Roberto's head, the natural next step from Color Games was characters moving through a 3D environment. The PC Junior was a significant step up from the Apple II, but true 3D in computers was still beyond the means of the programmers at Sierra. But with the future of the company depending on this one game, a workaround was found. Every 2D scene in the game will be divided into bands. By looking at which band the base of every game object falls into, the engine could tell which one needed to be drawn on top of the other. Essentially, the lower the base of the object, the closer it is to the virtual camera. With the relationship with their investors improving thanks to the big IBM contract, Roberto and Ken sighed with relief. There was a long road ahead, but as long as the PC Junior was not a total disaster, the worst times were probably behind them. And then the PC Junior came out. Fearing that the PC Junior might cannibalize sales on more premium PCs, IBM had taken some very questionable design choices that had crippled the PC Junior at launch. As soon as the first reviews hit, it was obvious that this would be dead on arrival. King Quest was by all accounts a masterpiece, but no matter how good the game was, it was of no use if it was attached to a PC that no one wanted to buy. This time, however, the catastrophe did not catch Ken and Roberta by surprise. They had a plan, and another unexpected ally: the US government. While IBM poured millions into catching up with the rest of the players in the home computer market, competitors in the space jumped at the opportunity of releasing clones of their machines that, up to a level, were compatible with their software. If you're curious about how the whole IBM PC was invented and cloned to hell and back, we have a whole video about that story. And yes, that was legal. And also, maybe IBM did not want to press on this issue too hard, because in 1969 the United States government had filed an antitrust lawsuit against IBM, concerned that their hold on the computer industry was bordering on the definition of monopoly. It took almost 13 years for IBM to just barely win the case, but this near-death experience had left IBM executives with a feeling of constant paranoia. And this paranoia led to some bizarre circumstances, including IBM adding a clause to their software contracts, making it super clear that developers could put their software on computers other than IBM. It was like the complete opposite of an exclusivity clause, please sell your stuff to someone else to prove that we're not a monopoly, please clause. And lucky for Sierra, a certain company called Radio Shack had just released the Tandy 1000, an IBM PC compatible meant to directly compete with the PC Junior, but that fixed most of its major shortcomings. Ken managed to reach an agreement with Radio Shack for King Quest to sell on the Tandy, but that was only the start. IBM PC compatibles were so incredibly successful that IBM PCs slowly became a bit of a default ecosystem, where the IBM part will slowly be forgotten and everyone just started calling the whole ecosystem PC. And with the growing PC user base hungry for games, Sierra was ready to deliver. King Quest will quickly become one of the best-selling games on the whole ecosystem. Their investors were flabbergasted. Never in their lives had they seen a company burn out and then rise like a phoenix this way. And for now, peace was settled. Sierra was free to continue pursuing computer games with their support and to maybe aim on becoming the biggest force in all of PC gaming. Aware of how shockingly close they had been to complete annihilation, the Williamses had a clear objective: expanding and diversifying. If they were going to last in this industry, they needed a consistent hit series and new diverse games, and they needed them quickly. Powered by the evolving PC ecosystem and the improved technology of the game engine, Roberta and her team got busy at continuing the King Quest series. Other teams at Sierra used the same engine to branch out into adventure games for a more mature demographic. And under Ken's direction, the company tried to break into all sorts of niches, from educational software to productivity software, with so many products made that entire videos could easily be made of all the obscure stuff they tried. But the next key to company immortality was acquisition, to acquire other companies and make them join the Sierra empire. And to do this, Ken had the perfect plan. His dream of running his own corporation was very much alive. Fall 1987. As Ken stands in front of a bunch of investment bankers, the moment he had waited for so long is about to materialize. Sierra is going public. Becoming a publicly traded company meant that stocks from the company were available to be bought by any registered trader, meaning that Ken had finally fulfilled his dream of running a big boy company. And if he played his cards well enough, he could diversify to survive by buying other game companies. And now that they were public, They had access to one of the oldest tricks in the corporate book. Ken could notice a super interesting game from a smaller studio and offer to give them a certain amount of Sierra stock in exchange for their company, letting them continue making games while leveraging Sierra's distribution network. The owners of the small studio now had stock they could liquidate whenever they want for cash, and Sierra acquired a new subsidiary without having to touch any money from their bank accounts. Hell, if the market reacted well to the news of the acquisition and Sierra stock went up, everyone ended up making more money. It's almost like an exploit sometimes. Anytime there's a big game company acquisition, check how much of that is on stock. You might be surprised how often this trick is used. However, some people were skeptic to this sort of technique. February 1992, Ken and Roberta sit in a private room of the fanciest and only high-end restaurant in Oakhurst, Elderberry House. In front of them sit some developers, tremendously underdressed for such a restaurant.
Look, you've seen our latest game, Wolfenstein 3D, but our new thing is going to blow that out of the water. My friend here has developed a 3D engine that is going to take gaming by storm. We're calling it Dune.
I mean, if we're honest, think we're both very impressed by what you're doing. How about we buy your company for $2.5 million in Sierra stocks?
Stock? No. We want $100,000 of that in cash as an advance.
The accounting to make a mixed stock and cash deal is complicated. Are you sure I can't convince you to take just the stocks?
No can do.
Well, that's a shame. I hope all goes well for your game.
As you can imagine, Ken will come to really regret that decision, as the game he had been pitched will pretty much define computer gaming for several generations, and he will not make that same mistake again. 1996, Ken receives a meeting request from a small studio formed by an ex-Microsoft employee.
We licensed the improved engine the Doom guys made and modified it to make a shooter that combines narrative elements with advanced enemy AI like nothing before it. And we're calling it Half-Life.
This time, he would not let this one get away.
We will publish your game and give you a huge advance in royalties. All I ask is ownership of the Half-Life IP, and we will take care of everything else.
He had made it. Sierra had its industry-defining shooter, fruit of the talent of a tiny game developer called Valve. The future of the company through diversification was guaranteed. Except that, in their desire to grow, they had flown too close to the sun, and now the smell of burnt wax started to linger in the air, because Ken Williams will not be at Sierra to see the release of Half-Life. This is Walter A. Forbes, a Harvard business graduate with a big idea. People like the Williamses had seen the rise of the home computer revolution and seen a way to build an empire out of the sheer appeal of video games, but Walter saw on these devices an opportunity for the business of the century, bypassing physical shops completely and selling to consumers directly through the power of computers and credit cards. An idea a bit too conventional today, but that was truly wild decades ago. With millions of dollars of investment, he founded a company, CompuCard, also known for its unfortunate acronym, CUC. For years, CUC languished, losing investment money and failing to gain traction due to a simple, tiny oversight. Home computers were still a rare thing amongst the general population in the US. So Walter pivoted to selling through a technology that was more familiar at the time: regular landline telephones. CUC will run a subscription service costing about $40 a year to get access to preferred prices for goods that subscribers will buy over the phone and get delivered home. The formula ended up being a success, with the service expanding to car ownership, insurance, and travel. The company exploded. With CUC stocks taking Wall Street by storm, Walter Forbes was elevated to the role of a visionary, the CEO of a bona fide multi-billion-dollar unicorn. Walter was everything Ken ever dreamt of becoming and more. So imagine his delight when Walter accepted to be part of the board of Sierra, to advise him on taking the game company to its full potential. And yet, he was about to get so much more from this move than he could ever expect. Because you see, Walter had never abandoned his original idea of an online shopping empire. At a time when Amazon was simply a bookstore, he dreamt of reconquering his original idea and turned the CUC subscription into a service that will start with preferred prices when buying online and could then become much, much more. And one day, after a Sierra board meeting, he approached Roberta with a bombshell of a question.
So, have you guys ever considered selling the company?
Every instinct in Roberta had raised a red flag at the proposal. She felt something was off, a feeling she had not felt since her original investors had urged them to jump at console gaming.
Nope, not interested in selling. We have not even considered the idea.
For Roberta, the idea of selling Sierra was absurd. She was in the prime of her designing career. One of her most recent games had blended real actors with game environments, an experience she had thoroughly enjoyed. Why would she ever want to quit? She retold the strange conversation to Ken, expecting to get some support on her views, but was instead met with the one thing she did not expect.
Well, but would that be so bad?
Reality was, Ken was exhausted. As the company gained more subsidiaries and their empire grew, it turned out that running a big company had not brought him the pleasure he so desperately hoped for. As much as he hired managers, he just had such a hard time delegated that he ended up running a lot of the business himself. He spent his days between airports, planes, traveling up and down different teams to hear their progress in each game, fighting over budgets and project scopes. He had not coded in years, and everyone started to see him as someone that would just go into meetings to complain about how out of budget everything was. Every time he recalled his early developer days, he just wondered if that might have been better. And as Roberta relayed the story about Walter, he felt a bit of something he had not expected: hope. And besides, as the CEO of a publicly traded company, he technically had the responsibility to hear any offer that brought value to their stockholders. So, with mixed feelings, he took a meeting with Walter.
Look, I think we both know the future of commerce and gaming is online. And if I want CUC to reach its maximum potential, I have to think big, beyond goods and travel. I feel the game industry is heading for maximum consolidation under one brand and one service, and I am the one who's going to pull it.
Turns out, Sierra was by far not the only game company Walter had reached out with proposals. LucasArts had received an offer, but maybe the most interesting for today's story was an extremely talented newcomer that had just put out a game called Warcraft. A studio called Blizzard, or more precisely, CUC wanted to buy their entire parent company, Davidson Associates.
We're going to start by combining Davidson with Sierra, and we will add more companies from there. We are going to create the biggest force computer gaming has ever seen. Everyone will get to make better and bigger things.
Will I get to continue being the CEO of the company if you buy it?
Of course, you will just receive some assistance from the now larger and more experienced management team.
An opportunity to delegate some of his management responsibilities to someone else? A chance to get Roberta enormous game production budgets to play around? It could be a trick, but what if this was a solution? So the deal was signed, using exactly the same trick Sierra had used to acquire a lot of companies before. Sierra was acquired by CUC by a pure stock exchange for over $1 billion. But almost immediately, Roberta's original instincts during the first offer will be confirmed. As Walter repeats a similar meeting, but this time with Bob Davidson, president of Davidson Associates, trying to convince him to combine both companies, an additional secret promise will be made.
So after you buy and merge both companies, who is going to lead them?
But of course, my boy, you will.
Almost immediately after the merge, the team from Davidson started taking over and interfering with operations at Sierra. Now the sales team at Sierra will have to constantly fight Davidson to market their games, which they often consider too scary or too racy. And as Sierra employees started feeling the pressure of their new overlords, tensions flared. Roberta and her team had been busy at work with King Quest VIII, Mask of Eternity, hoping to put that CUC money to good use, but something had changed. Rumors spread that the Davidson team found all the magic and occultism of the King Quest series just too objectionable to market. More importantly, her own dev team, perhaps angry at having to now fight the sales team to complete their game, and perhaps more than a bit angry at the Williamses' decision to sell the company, silently started rebelling. Roberta will find her design decisions ignored constantly, and elements of the game completely changed from what she had asked. Overnight, making games had gone from the best time of their lives to an absolute nightmare. The fight for control of the company with Davidson stretched for years, and eventually the Williamses just gave up. Heartbroken and burned out, they decided to exit the game industry entirely and sell all the CUC shares they have received. But at least that last small decision turned out to have a very fortunate timing. Because here's the question: how was CUC's stock price so high that they could just acquire multiple billion-dollar companies to consolidate the industry overnight?
The secret ingredient is crime.
Shortly thereafter, CUC will merge with another company to create a simply gigantic consortium called Sendent. And after the merge, their new investors scrutinized CUC books and found something horrifying. For 3 straight fucking years, CUC had been lying about their profits to the tune of more than $500 million. The plan was simple: lie about their profits to increase their share price, and then use those shares to acquire companies like Sierra, and hope that the acquisitions will generate enough money to hide all their lies about profit, and so on and on for years. And as soon as the news hit, the stock price plummeted. Every employee of Sierra or any of the subsidiary that still held stock options saw their money vanish overnight. So many people lost so much money that Walter Forbes himself was put on trial and was convicted of financial fraud and spent 12 years in prison with a charge of $3.2 billion in damages. As CEO in federal prison, he was still there until like 2008. The Sendan managers, desperate to cut off the bad parts of the company before the whole disaster spread, started selling off every part of the company they could, and the game division went to a French company called Havas, which will slowly but surely shut down Sierra forever. The dream had ended. All their intellectual property stayed with the few studios that, against all odds, survived. Mostly Blizzard, which stayed in Havas until the whole thing was bought by a company called Vivendi, and then Vivendi was bought by Activision to form Activision Blizzard, which was somewhat recently bought all by Microsoft, so they technically own all of Sierra's IP. Probably burned out from this whole deal, Valve started internally working on a system that will make them able to bypass retailers and sell games directly to consumers. And even more incredible, they successfully sued Vivendi to get back the Half-Life IP they had inherited during this whole mess. And they, in turn, will become one of the biggest forces in PC gaming, while aggressively remaining a private company that does not publicly trade its stocks. And honestly, after living through this whole thing, can you blame them? As Roberta and Kim watch all they had built burn up from the sidelines, they couldn't help wonder that if they had made just a few different decisions, a different name will be on every gaming PC right now. It will take them 25 years to even try to do a game again, a remake of Colossal Cave Adventure, the same game that made Roberta fall in love with the medium in the first place. This time, it will be a smaller indie affair, and one can only hope that finally, they're happy to just be making a game. I hope you enjoyed this remastered collection of 2 videos for this channel, now presented as one story. If you're hungry for more, there are a couple of bonus Nebula videos to watch. First is the story of one of the riskier games early Sierra made, which I'm not sure I can say its name in YouTube, and the very weird and risky way they chose to market it. The second is about one of Sierra's most ambitious failed projects, the Sierra Network. An entire system to socialize and play online before the internet was even a commercial thing. All of these are part of Sidequest, my series of side videos all found in Nebula, a creator-owned streaming service for all our videos plus extra content and high-quality originals like Wendover's Logistics of X. This channel is funded by those of you subscribed to Nebula, and you can get in with a heavy discount using my link, with 40% off on annual plans, which goes down to as little as $2.5 a month. Thank you for supporting this channel in Nebula.